Hey guys, Billy from AdSport here. In this video I'm going to be running through my exact creative testing process for Facebook, basically how to find winners, how to structure the campaigns, etc. to get the best results, how long to test things for, and then ultimately, what to test and how to find new winners in an account. From what I've seen, you only really need 2 or 3 winning ads in an account to scale pretty far, as long as you refresh them on a regular basis. So yeah, let's jump into it. So before we get into the nitty gritty campaign structure, how many ads should you have in an ad set, bidding, all of that good stuff, I just want to go over some key things to think about before we get into that, just as fundamentals of testing in general. So big mistake I see a lot of people make is that they don't have a hypothesis before they make new ads. They're just like, oh cool, we need new ads, script 5 new ads. There's no underlying thinking behind it. There's no hypothesis. There's no good tracking of the result of those tests, and then there's no kind of feedback on the system as far as the next iteration. So when you test any ad, it should have a specific hypothesis behind it, like the example here. So let's say you're running ads, you have a hypothesis that if you add banners to the ad, it's going to make more people stop in the ad. More people stop in the ad, more people are going to read the ad. More people read the ad, they're going to click to the landing page, and so on and so on and so on. So that's the hypothesis. Again, so under that, you've created the hypothesis and assumption. Then you need to create the tested parameters. So how will you measure if this test is successful? We'll go into that in more detail later on, but here I'll just say don't have it just be CTR and CPC. Those are valuable at some stage, but they don't give you the whole picture of the ad. Again, there's things that can be done to manipulate CTR, make it very high. It can look like an ad's performing really well, but the back end metric is going to be terrible. So we'll talk about this part next. Then you're going to conduct the test, again, launch the ads in the method that I give you later on. You're going to analyze data, find out whether this worked or not. Did it meet the testing parameters that you had? How did you know? Do you know if it's a success or not? You're going to draw a conclusion. So you're going to say, adding banners to the ad had no effect, it had a positive effect, it had a negative effect, and then what you're going to do is create a new hypothesis. So the new hypothesis could be, we should not use banner ads, we should use some other, we should test thumbnails, etc. to get people to stop in the ad. If the thumbnails work, it could be, cool, we did a limited test of thumbnails, let's go and test a wider range. Let's go and test 10 instead of the 5 that we did originally. Let's go and test 10 more and see if we can continue to get a bump and refresh our ads. So the hypothesis should be specific. It shouldn't be like, if we change the meshing of this ad, we'll get better performance. Like, it needs to be specific what you're actually going to do. So again, it might be, let's call out so-and-so people in the beginning. Let's go, whatever it is. It will improve ad performance. So it can be a format change again. So the hypothesis might be, if I crop my ad to 1:1 for the feed placements, 9:16 vertical for the stories placement, that's going to improve results because it's going to look way better on the feeds, fill the whole placement, and just overall look better. I've seen that to be a pretty significant improvement. It's something that I tell all of our clients to do, especially when we work with their video editors, especially when it comes to Facebook. For Google, it's simple. You just need a landscape version of the ad, but for Facebook we need 1:1 version and a 9:6 version of every single ad. So what I typically do is I'll upload the square version when I make the ad, and then I'll edit all of the stories placements to have the vertical version of the ad included in there so that it looks great, and that improves performance significantly over not doing that. Cool, that's fine. Again, some of this will be more clear as I get down and go into the points further down. So variable testing. So any ad you test should have one variable. Like, if the creative is going to be tested, so the video or the static is going to be the thing that you're testing, everything else should be kept the same as a control variable. So audience, ad copy, landing page, placements, everything should be exactly the same, other than the one thing that you're changing and testing for, so that if a test's successful, okay, that one thing was the reason that this is different. It's the same reason why too. Often I'll launch an ad test to 2 different audiences as well, because I want to remove the variable of the audience being the reason that something didn't work. If I launch it to one audience, it might be that, okay, the audience didn't work, it wasn't the ads. If I launch it to 2, I know that at least one of those is going to work, and so any performance of the ads is truly representative of their performance and not of some other factor I haven't thought about. So that's what you need to do. Again, like I've said in point B here, you won't know if you launch new videos, but then you test some ad copy and you throw some new headlines in there, any improvement or decrease in performance, it won't be clear which of those two factors has led to it. So you really want to be as scientific as you can. Again, I understand the way Facebook is, the way the algorithm works. You could launch exactly the same ad set with the same audience, same ads, same placements, etc., and they can perform wildly differently in two different scenarios. But we need to, regardless of that, just be as scientific as we possibly can. And then lastly, like when it comes to testing things, like I would just theme them. So if you record 10 ads, don't throw them all in one ad set together. You really want to keep them separate. So if it's videos that we're testing versus statics, that'll be two different ad sets. If there's call out ads and banner ads, we're not going to throw them in the same ad set together. They'll be in two separate ad sets. One will be, call out test. One will be banner test. Those will be separate. You really want to do that. You want to theme things together and not, kind of just jumble everything together. Same goes, I think we'll talk about it later on, but when it comes to DCO or any of the more like kind of algorithm based or giving Facebook more control, any of those things within the account, whether it be CBO, DCO, Advantage Plus audiences, any of that stuff, you want to reserve that for when you've got proven assets. So proven audiences, proven ads, you can throw proven ads in the DCO. I've seen that do very well. Again, when you're launching a scaling campaign, it wants to be, and you throw it on a higher budget on CBO, those should all be proven audiences. If you're going to test Advantage Plus, it should be with winning ads, with winning base audiences before you do that. So just a quick note there. So yeah, another big concept here to think about, which I'm going to flesh out again in another video, is the macro versus micro thing. Another mistake I see a lot of people make is that they focus too much on small changes in the beginning, especially when you're first launching or if you're at a low budget. Everything is basically a variable, and so you're looking for big changes in performance, and so wildly different messaging until you've figured out what works. Like, because if you've only launched 5 ads and one of them does great, how do you know there's not another ad that you could launch that performs twice as good? You just haven't launched enough yet to kind of establish a baseline. So what you should be really doing in the beginning is macro test. How can you record the ad in a totally different location? How can you record it in a totally different style? How could the messaging be totally different, rather than just saying the hook in a different way? How could you say something wildly different, and just test things and just see what test using a wildly different pain point in the ad, something like that. So yeah, what we're looking at low spend, and then again, if you're in the beginning, you want to test macro changes, so big changes in messaging, total changes of how the ad's filmed, and then it's only once you find a truly winning ad, which again you can only do over time when you have a lot to compare it to. If you've launched 50 ads and you know that 1 or 2 are winners, you can be sure that is probably up there with the amount of performance you're going to get. Doesn't mean that you can't beat it by 5%, 10%, but it's not going to be a wildly different change. Whereas if you only have 5 ads, you truly don't know what your benchmarks are and what your winning kind of metrics should be in the end. So in the beginning, test macro. When you're at scale, once you have a bunch of winning ads, then you can test micro things, whether it's changing the music, whether it's changing the background color on a static image, whether it's adding banners, changing the copy on banners, whatever it is, these little things, testing thumbnails. Those things can all give you a bump, but they shouldn't be done until you've established a baseline, made those macro changes, tested a wide variety of things to find what works. Next part that's super important is assessing performance accurately, which I alluded to in the bit above here where we had the create and tested parameters. So this is what's really important here. If I learn how to scroll on a page. So do not use a single metric to determine if an ad is a winner. Don't launch 10 ads, go, this ad's got the top CTR, this is the winner, let's scale it. I'd already kind of understood this concept before, but I didn't have the right words to say it. But when I discovered what Goodhart law is, which is when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. If you make CTR the goal, or the target in this case, it will cease to be a good measure, just because CTR can be manipulated. So the way to get a higher CTR is basically to say do less qualifying in the ad, give people less information. The hyperbolic example I always use, which is in there, which is I could run an ad where I literally just say, like, we're giving 100 lucky people $1 million each. Click here to learn more. That's the whole ad. It's 10 seconds long. The CTR on that will be 10%. That doesn't mean it's a good performing ad, but if you use the metric there where CTR is the only thing that you optimize for, you're going to go in the wrong direction. So again, like I said here, I've had a penny for every time people told me on coaching calls that their outbound CTR is like 2%, 4%. I've seen wild examples like that where it's 4%, 5%, but they're not getting any leads and they're not getting any calls. Clearly something's fundamentally wrong with the ad. There's a big disconnect between what's said in the ad, what's said on the landing page. Obviously that part is way more intangible and way harder to measure as far as what I would call congruency between the messaging on the ad, the messaging on the landing page, the messaging on the VSL. But if you just focus on CTR, you're going to totally miss that and optimize down the wrong road, basically. So, as I've said, I've already given you the example of how CTR can be manipulated. So basically, you should weigh metrics differently. So, again, something I'm still coming to terms with exactly how to describe this, but ultimately you want to give more weight to back-end metrics. So CAC is number one. It doesn't matter what the cost per call is. Let's say the cost per call is $500 for an ad set, but the cost per acquisition is $1,000 on a $5,000 product. We're sweet, we're in the green, no worries. But maybe there's another ad set where the cost per call is $150, but the CAC is $2,000. I'm still going to scale the one with a $500 cost per call because the CAC is great. Don't care what CTR is, don't care what CPL is. It's getting us consistent customers over a period of time for $1,000. That's all that matters. If you don't have any sales yet or any customers, what you'll do is prioritize cost per qualified call. So we have this set up, both tracking the ad account in a high-ROS account as well, so we can see the cost per qualified call. So again, that would be another great metric. If you don't have sales, one of the main things that we focus on for clients is the cost per qualified call, obviously, that shows up. The only way to know that if they're qualified is if they show up. So that's the second thing that I would track. Again, if you don't have lead scoring, don't have quality assessment in place, what you do is track the cost per call. Again, you have to be a little bit careful on this. If it's too low, again, there's going to be quality issues. If you're paying $40 for a call, likelihood is the quality isn't going to be there. You're either going to have show rate problems or closing problems. So the same thing if it's too high. Again, in the example, I know I'm going to contradict myself a bit here, but if your cost per call is $500 and you don't have a very low CAC, that can just be way more of an issue. You're not going to be profitable. You'll have to find what your allowable cost per call is, and as long as an ad set is under there, you should be good to run it to at least the cost per acquisition averaged across all your ad sets and campaigns. Cool. If you don't have any calls yet, we're going to look at CPL, so cost per lead. Again, what is that? And if we don't have leads, we're going to say what is the unique outbound CTR, etc. So you should ultimately take all of these into account together. Really, you want to get a full assessment of it. But again, if one of them's out of whack, if the CAC's great, the cost per call's a little bit higher than we'd like, because the CPM maybe is higher than it should be, we're fine. We're in a good position. If everything is out of whack, again, if the cost per call is super high, we've only had one sale, that's not enough significant data. I always look at it as far as probability. If a campaign's at $250 calls, for every 2 calls we get with that campaign, the ones that are at $500, we're only getting 1 call over a period of time. If quality stays relatively similar between the two, we've got way more probability of closing more people if we're getting twice as many opportunities. So I'd kind of look at things in that way. I don't want to muddy the water too much. Any questions on prioritization of metrics, etc., when it comes to assessing your creative test, let me know. There will be more detail lower down, but any questions, just throw them in the comments of this video. Cool. So the way I've structured the next bit is kind of like a frequently asked questions. I've had 3-4 people reach out very recently in the last week or so about creative testing, so I've kind of restructured some of their questions here to get you kind of the best answers and answer probably questions that are going to be on your mind. So the first one is, what budget do you start off with per ad set? So this depends on the total spend of the account. Really, when I look at this, there's 2 things that I take into account. The first is how much of the overall account spend is this going to make up. So I'd really want to keep testing below 20% ideally. Again, if you're just launching an account, obviously 100% of what you launch is going to be testing. So over time, you should work to have it be 80-20, between 80% winning, scaling ad sets, 20% budget to testing. The second part too is like, how long is it going to take for this ad set to be valuable? How long is it going to take us to get creative data? So if the account is at 5k a day, I launch an ad set that's testing creative at $5 a day. It's going to take me a very, very long time to find winners for that ad. And also, if I want to scale that ad set up, if it performs well, it's going to take me a very long time to get it from $5 a day to $500 a day, knowing that there's going to be volatility created if I scale it too quickly. So Those are the two things that I factor in. Again, typically I think between $100 and $200 a day is where you'd likely want to get to. If you're at $250 a day, having an ad set launch at $20 a day, testing creative is not going to be a big deal. So just really weigh it up based on how much you're spending right now and how much of a priority is as well is going to play into it as well. If you know that creative fatigue is something that you're really running into, getting new creative tested is a massive priority. You might want to assign more of the overall spend to creative testing, knowing it's going to pay off in the long run, and it's going to be something that gives you an immediate bump in performance. So hopefully that gives you some insight into kind of how you should tailor that for your own situation. Next is when testing new things, how long do you run the test for? So like I mentioned before, you really want to find the average CAC for a winning ad set, and that's what you want to run your ad set until you hit that, providing all of the other metrics are within KPI. What you want to do really, like I mentioned before, is implement early indicators so that you don't have to run it fully to the CAC. So if you have application grading, whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is, whether it's qualified or unqualified, what you can then do is understand how many qualified calls are coming from a particular ad set. If there is a problem and all the calls are unqualified, the likelihood of us getting a sale is very, very low. So we can probably go ahead and turn that off. We don't need to run it to $1,000 or $2,000, whatever your CAC is. We can do it. So again, the CAC I'm talking about here is probably more for high ticket, call funnels, etc. So again, if your cost per sale is a low ticket funnel and your cost per, AOV is $100, you don't really want to be spending any more than like $150 to find out if an ad set's going to work or not, or a creative is going to work or not. Next is what the maximum budget you spend on an ad set before turning it off. So this is a little optimization calculator. Again, this is a little bit rudimentary, but I think it will basically stop you from going super wrong. Again, there's some nuance to this. There's some experience that plays into this, but this will give you a good idea. So basically, if CPM, CTR are in line, what you'd want to do is run it until 1.5 to 2x your average CPL. Again, this is going to be for a call funnel or for any lead gen campaign. So let's say our cost per lead is $10, we're going to run it to $15 to $20. If it doesn't have a lead by then, we're going to turn it off. I would be way more aggressive in the beginning. If you're just launching an account or if you're at $500 a day or less, I would just be super aggressive. Again, the reason we're able to be so aggressive like this is that I have rarely seen an ad set on Facebook that has started badly and got better. It tends to be that if an ad set's going to perform well, it pretty much performs gangbusters from the beginning. So I think you can be way more aggressive with this. So yeah, if you want to go more on the 2x side, if you have a $10 CPL and you want to let things run to $20 with no leads, I'm fine with that. But yeah, obviously the caveat here is to run it to at least a day or two. Don't just turn it off after 5 hours of it running. But anyway, so if the cost per lead's in line, we're going to run it into 1.5 the cost per call. So let's say the cost per call is $100. We're going to run it until $150 as long as the CPL is in line, CTR, CPM are all good. If not, we're going to turn it off. And then again, the same thing, if the cost per call is within KPI, so if the cost per call is below 150, CPL looks good, we're going to run it until our average CAC, so let's say that's $1,000. And then if it doesn't have a sale by that point, we're going to turn it off. We also have the option too, we can turn it off at the $1,000. If we find out that the sales cycle is relatively long, we end up getting sales from that ad set, we can turn it back on. I've done that recently. I've not found there to be that much volatility in performance, and some of them actually perform very well. So I think there's always an option. I've seen that before a couple times recently where I've turned ad sets off because the calls were at our KPI. After turning them off, there was a bunch of calls that came in later, so I don't think there was too much risk in turning it off, assessing performance and then turning it back on it if I needed to. So I'd recommend you do the same thing. If you turn it off and it gets 2 or 3 sales over the coming 30 days, review things on a regular basis and you can just always turn it back on. Cool. So when you're doing variations of winning ads, what should you focus on? So I really focus on, and I was already doing this, and then it's been validated by Alex Amosi, some other high-level people that I've spoken to that spend a lot of money on ads, that 80% of what you do should be variations on winners and 20% should be brand new angles. Again, they should be based on a hypothesis. So if we add more social proof to the ad, it's going to perform better, build better trust with the audience, more people will click the ad. If we have a more specific call out, so instead of coaches and course creators, it's coaches and course creators struggling with their email marketing, whatever it is. If it's a specific ad style, so hey, if we just film it more organically, we're filming it selfie style on their phone walking down the street, that's going to perform better than being at a desk. So 80% is going to be variations on winners. Again, I'll talk slightly lower down about what those tests should be, but the 20% is brand new angles, but there should be a reason and some thinking behind it. It shouldn't just be kind of random harebrained schemes, although some of it can be that, some of it can just be wildcards. We have one of our clients that's very good at filming ads. He always does that. We'll send him 10 hooks to record. He'll record 2 or 3 that are, we always label them wildcards, but they're whatever he wants to do. Maybe it's being silly, maybe it's like fucking jumping in a lake, whatever it is. We give him license to do that, and again, we launch those at a lower budget, see if they work or not. Some of them have crushed, some of them have done terribly, but it's worth doing because some of those can be better. So cool. And then, do you only focus on the first 5 seconds of the ad? So specifically, obviously this is for video ads, but the answer is yes. So we really optimize front to back. So most people are going to see the first 5 seconds of the ad. A very small amount of people are going to see the last 5 seconds. So by that virtue, it's most important for us to optimize the first 5 seconds. Obviously, even before that, we've got the headline, we've got the thumbnail of the video, we've got any banners that are on the video as well. Those are probably going to be the first things that people interact with. So those should be your priority, and those should be the things that you put most focus and attention on. The CTA, the main body of the ad, less important than just, the hook and all the factors I spoke about as far as, what's going to stop people on the feed. So typically when we launch a creative batch, it's about 10 hooks and 2 bodies. And so, yeah, we'll just go ahead and get those tested. Normally in 2 different kind of batches, essentially, because this will be 20 ads total. So we'll probably launch 10 at one time, and then once we find out what's performed or what hasn't performed, we'll launch the next 10. Cool. Does changing minimal things like music, editing style, does it have an effect, and is it worth testing? So again, going back to the point before about macro, micro, it does have an effect, but only really if you're at big scale and if you're doing it to proven winners. If you're just doing this to ads that haven't even been proven yet, if you've never launched the ad before but you launch it with 3 different music styles, I'd say that's an utter waste of time. So definitely don't do that, but it's worth doing for proven winners. Winning ads can perform for a long time if you do these little things to combat creative fatigue, whether it's changing the colors, changing the background. I know Alex Emoji would always talk about the example he's got where there was a great testimonial that crushed for them. They chopped up the video, had different parts at the start, they changed the background, they edited the background out and made it just black. They did different editing styles, they did everything they could to just refresh it, and that made it consistently perform over time. It was a winning ad that they were able to just refresh and combat creative fatigue with, just by making it look different, sound different. So I think they even had the guy record the ad again, just in a different location or something like that. So that's always an option too. If you have a winning hook, just record it in a different style or just record it again. Cool. So the things you can do, again, refresh thumbnails, ad style, at desk, selfie walking around, different backgrounds, lighter backgrounds, darker backgrounds, whatever it is, add banners, add different editing styles, have more minimal style, have more high energy, lots of motion graphics, things like that. There's lots of different things you can do to change it up. Cool. And then when you take winning ads from a testing campaign, what do you do with them? So I used to have a specific creative testing campaign. I now just have it kind of as part of the one main kind of AVO campaign I have in the account, just to centralize things. And I don't have so much of a philosophy like I did before, which is as soon as ads are winning ads, that ad set gets turned off, they get moved into a winning ad set and launched again. What I now do is that, I'm happy to scale a creative testing campaign. If it books calls within KPI and it does well, I'll scale it up, because there's 2 reasons. First of all, is booking calls great, we're going to make sales. Second of all, it's going to enable us to get data faster and understand how those ads do at scale. So green light campaigns, if I launch a creative test and they start doing well, I don't think, I'm going to keep them in this campaign at $100 a day. As soon as I get enough data on which is the winners, I'm going to move them to a winning campaign. I don't really look at it like that. However, that said, even if I'm scaling that campaign, it might be that I would insert them into a bigger CPO that we have, or winning. Maybe I'll launch a new ad set that's just proven ads. I'm going to include those winning ads from that creative test in there. But I wouldn't restrict yourself to say this is just a creative test and ad set. It's not a scaling ad set. We're not allowed to increase the budget, etc. Depends on who you learn ads from, whether that's an issue for you or not, or something that you're doing, but I just thought I'd raise that. As far as structuring ad sets, how many ads do you test at once? Cool. typically 5 ads in an ad set. I think any more than that is tough to get spend to all of them in an efficient manner. Any less than that, I think potentially you lose out on some efficiency as far as whether that ad is going to perform or not. So obviously the number one thing is isolating variables. So as far as the testing ad set, we need to have the same audience, the same placements, no DCO, have the same ad copy, have all of that. Again, 5 ads per ad set, roughly. Again, if it's 3, if it's 6, you're fine. Again, 1 to 2 ads are going to receive probably 90% of the spend. I had somebody ask me if this is an issue, because again, like, it's what everybody will experience if they launch more than 1 ad per ad set. I don't think it's an issue. I've rarely seen the ones that Facebook pick as winners not be the true winners. I've regularly done it where I'll have those 2 out of the 5 will receive 90% of the spend. I'll break out the other 3 into a new ad set, obviously pause them in the existing ad set, and relaunch them, but they've never really been winners for me. So I wouldn't really worry about that. I'd be fairly confident Facebook's got it right. They do pre-testing or kind of test impressions where they get engagement data, conversion data, etc. So they kind of know which ads are going to perform the best even before they're live. So when they choose which ads to put spend to, they're right most of the time. Again, if they're not in KPI and they're not doing well, just turn them off. Again, that will slowly push spend to the rest of the ads in the ad set. But if they're performing, then there's no issue. Meta knows best, as I've said there. Obviously, the alternative to do that is to launch single ad sets with single ads. I think that's obviously going to be way more work for you to manage. And then I think also, kind of what I mentioned in the previous point about scaling testing campaigns, you're going to lose out on a lot of efficiency by only having 1 ad and not giving Facebook the freedom to spend between different ad sets. So they're going to fatigue very quick if you try to push any sort of decent spend into that ad set. So as such, you can only serve the purpose of being a creative testing campaign. So for that reason, I don't think having a single ad per ad set is the right way to go. But that's personal preference. Cool. What situations where what do you do in situations where a campaign or ad set isn't necessarily starting well? Similar to what I said before, on Facebook, I've rarely seen something start badly and do better. Again, I've run a lot of Google ads and YouTube ads, and that's slightly different in that case. Again, things can tend to be slightly higher on a cost per lead and cost per call basis, and then optimize down over time. Whereas on Facebook, I don't see that happen. I tend to see ad sets start well, be the winners. I don't really see things get better over time. Obviously, there's a little bit of a lag period between leads and calls, but once you've started to get calls in, it's tends to not get better. It tends to just fatigue over time and get slightly worse. So, cool. Like I said here, if you're just launching ads or you're below $500, I'd be more aggressive. Again, if you're, we're spending 5K a day, 4K a day, 3K a day, whatever it is, I'd probably be more conservative. Make sure you give things a full test and you're fully confident before you turn something off. But in the beginning, you kind of just need to focus way more of your budget on what's working because you've got less budget to play with. So just be really diligent and turn things off as soon as they're out of KPI. Again, similar, just refer to the optimization calculator in Q3 in question 3 about making decisions on ads. Cool. And then what placements do you use to test ads? So I just use Facebook. Someone asked if I just used a Facebook newsfeed, desktop newsfeed, mobile and desktop newsfeed, and just reels and stories on Instagram and Facebook. I actually don't select anything different for Facebook and Instagram. I just exclude Messenger and Audience Network. And so I think those have proven to be pretty low value placements. So I tend to just get rid of those. I've seen, across a bunch of data on accounts where we've, spent hundreds, thousands, that those have consistently not performed. So yes, you can just restrict it to Facebook and Facebook mobile and desktop news feeds, and Instagram, desktop and mobile news feeds and the reels and stories. I think that's fine, but I'd rather you just excluded Audience Network and Messenger. So that's everything. I feel like I'm waffling and running out of energy. So any questions that you've got, put them in the YouTube comments, and I will see you in the next one. Peace out.